Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another live webinar with today's guest, owner of Organizing Remedies, Cindy Garloch, and her topic is curing mind clutter, how to let go and be more productive. So, Cindy, I am yielding the floor to you, and your presentation is up on the screen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian, for having me on today. I was excited to prepare this presentation, and I'm hoping to help and inspire a few people along the way. So let's get started. What is clutter? What do people think about when I say clutter? Well, to me, clutter is anything that stands in between the life you're living now and the one you want to be living. So you might be thinking more about maybe, your overfilled pantry, or only being able to park one car in a two-car garage, or maybe too many clothes in your closet like I had a long time ago. That's physical clutter. A lot of people are really familiar with that. But there's social clutter, such as energy zapping friends. Does anybody have any of those? Or financial clutter, known as debt. There's even emotional clutter, which is kind of a subset of mind or mental clutter. And I'll just let you know, I'll probably use mind clutter and mental clutter interchangeably today, and just know they're one and the same. One thing I want to say from the start is that the bad news is that all types of clutter are usually related. I know that doesn't sound like very good news at all. That's kind of a hard way to start the program, but what it means is that if a person has mind clutter, they usually have physical clutter and sometimes financial clutter. It's like a triple whammy. But the good news is, and there always has to be some good news, is once one type of clutter is reduced or eliminated, the other types of clutter are reduced and eliminated as well. So that's kind of good news. I've seen that with many of my clients time and time again. And I'll share a short story later in the webinar, and you can see how this all comes together, I promise. That sounds fairly promising, doesn't it? I want to share a practical example to get started that illustrates how all of these types of clutters are related. Because you might have physical clutter or mental clutter or financial clutter, but you don't really understand how they're related. So I want to show you quickly a practical example. Pretend that you just got home from a 3-hour, very expensive, unhealthy dinner with your girlfriend. She went on and on about, well, you're not really sure what. All you know is you don't have the extra money or the extra calories to spend every time you go out, because you go out with her a lot. You get home and you sit down to finalize your report that's due tomorrow, and you realize you're not as nearly far along as you thought. It's going to be an all-nighter. And your daughter comes running up to you and asking if she can have a sleepover on Saturday. And your husband's telling you that you never get to see each other anymore. And if you could only find your desk, you could start working on that webinar you're doing on Thursday. And you were going to clean out your overstuffed closet for the church garage sale. There's so many tasks and emotions swirling around in your head. Your head is pounding. You want to lay your head down. Just lay your head down and cry. Ryan, can you advance the slide two slides? Number 3, please. I skipped number 2, trying to minimalize. Have you ever, we're looking at a head, does anybody ever feel like this? I know I have, and more than once. We all have. But you might be wondering, how do we let go of this clutter? The heaviness we're all experiencing, to get rid of that head with on the cart that you're carrying around all the time. It's very heavy, and we have to let it go so that we can be more productive. Next slide. Next. Okay. It's still not changing on my side. Okay. The next thing, so we don't know how to let go of all this clutter, which is probably why you're listening to this webinar. All that heaviness that you're experiencing that you just want to let go so you can be more productive. But the truth is, we don't need more time. We just need to decide. So what does that exactly mean? The author of this quote is Seth Godin, who's an American author and business executive. The essence of this is true, right? We have to have priorities. We have to decide what's going to fill every day. So at the end of our life, we've had a balance of what we've wanted to do and what we needed to do. So here I have a couple of tips that I want to go through that will help you reduce some of your mental clutter and be more productive. The first thing I want you to think about, and this isn't easy, especially for women, but men too, is to learn to say no unless you want to say an emphatic yes. There's no reason to really explain your no. I know we all feel like we need to explain, but all you have to say is, I can get back to you. Let me think about it. Or let me check my calendar. Most of the time, people will just need someone to fill a spot. You don't always have to be that person. And in my experience, you'd be amazed how many times they find someone else with you just saying a simple no. I speak from experience that it may be uncomfortable for you at first or for a minute to say no, but trust me, the feeling will pass. But you may be saying, what if you feel you can't say no? Or if it's something you want to do, but maybe under different circumstances. My suggestion for that is to offer an alternative. For example, the friend in the beginning of the webinar that always wants to go out for a 3-hour dinner experience, expensive eating, very unhealthy, and drinks and asks for advice but never takes it. That part of the story happened to me with this one friend a lot. I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do, but I figured it out. I decided that after much stress and agony over hurting her feelings and our friendship, I suggested meeting at a local park and walking for an hour and bringing a healthier lunch or dinner. She was so relieved. She said that sounded so great, that she was also relieved because the dinners and lunches were getting really expensive with unwanted calories and bills, but she didn't want to say anything. So all that overthinking and stress for nothing. Now when I get home from meeting her, I'm not as mentally exhausted. I've exercised, I've eaten much healthier, gotten some fresh air, and feel good about getting together. But you know what the real bonus is? The real bonus on top of all these other pluses is that I have the time and energy to decide what I want to do when I get home with my extra or newfound time. Something that I want to do for that extra 2 hours. Maybe read a book or play a game with my husband or work on something for my organizing business that I just haven't had the time to do. Now, I know the slide says that you don't need more time, you just need to decide. Well, at least Seth Godin did. But now I want to share some tips that will help you with the mental clutter by reducing some of the time you spend on things that you have to do, because we all have things that we have to do or we should do that we just can't get out of. So here's a couple tips to simplify your life a little bit so that you have more time to do what you want to do and to be more productive. The first is not to waste time on non-important decisions. What do I mean by that? Well, decisions that you make every day, they cause mental clutter and fatigue. I read somewhere that your brain can only handle so many decisions a day, which kind of makes sense if you decide things all day. At least with my clients, after so many hours, they are fatigued. And I'm fatigued too, because I'm always trying to stay a step ahead of them, trying to figure out how to guide them. But sometimes by the time you decide what to wear, what to have for breakfast, what you're going to put in the kids' lunches, what you're going to have for dinner when your husband gets home, and you work for half a day, you're done with your decision-making skills for the day. I know this seems like an exaggeration to some, but think about it. If you simplify the things you have to do, you would have a lot more decision-making energy for the rest of the day. So I want to share a couple of decision-making tips I use and share with my organizing clients. I wear very similar outfits every single day. I have a couple of basic colors in my wardrobe for my pants, my shorts, my skirts, my sweaters, and my blazers. So basically my bottoms and the tops I put over things. I have black and brown. I used to have navy, gray, tan, all those different colors. But I let them go. I decided I was going to simplify my wardrobe, and I spiced up my wardrobe with colored shirts and tank tops, and everything matches and mixes together and works really well together. So I still have that pop of bright colors, but the rest of it is so much more simple. My decisions are so much less, and getting dressed in the morning is a little easier. Actually, it's a lot easier. It takes me a lot less time and a lot less decisions. So just keep it simple. For meals, consider meal planning, or to make it more simple, if planning overwhelms you. I struggle to do this, and my husband and I talk about it a lot, so hopefully maybe after this webinar we can really put it into practice, is to consider meal planning or make it even more simple by considering having Taco Tuesday, Pizza Friday, Leftover Sunday every week. You know, you would plan for every day of the week, but you get my point. Or the same for a cleaning schedule. You may do the kitchen on Sundays, laundry on Monday, bathrooms on Tuesday, and have a fun day on Sunday. You get the picture. Now, my mother-in-law goes shopping every Thursday, and that's her day. That's when she shops. So if we're going over for a meal, she wants to know if we're going to bring something, what we're going to bring, so that she doesn't buy it at the store. But she wants to know by Thursday, so because she's not going back on Friday or Saturday before we come over for dinner in Euchre. So it's kind of nice that we know that. At first I was kind of like, really? But now I'm like, oh my gosh, she just knows when she's going and she makes a plan. It's really inspiring, actually. So if you have less thinking, less decisions, you have more time for relaxing or doing things you want to do, right? It's important to keep in mind to do what works for you and your schedule. Base it on your kid's schedule, your spouse's schedule, and know that you can tweak it if you need to tweak it. You can make a plan. If it doesn't work or you have to tweak it a little bit, it's okay. You're making progress. It's about progress and not perfection. Which leads me to my next point. Maybe you've heard or seen this. I think it's really impactful and worth sharing. Next slide, Brian. Okay, so the next slide talks about 1 minute in planning saves 10 minutes in execution, which leads to more energy, which is essentially what it says. There we go. Every minute in planning saves 10 minutes in execution, which gives you 1,000% return on energy. This is one quote I really like to use with clients and myself. It sounds pretty good to me. Think about it on a bigger scale. If you spend 6 minutes planning, 6 minutes, and you can save yourself an hour, does that sound good to anyone else? Sounds pretty darn good to me. Another tip that helps me is to schedule your day the night before. I know that right now with COVID-19, most of us have plenty of extra time on our hands. I know I do. But that doesn't mean we can sit around and watch TV and eat all day. I mean, that was fun for the first few days, and then reality hit. We're much past that. Now's the time to establish new routines, adding hobbies that you enjoy, but you can still be productive because you have more time. But we do have the time to take a walk or do a workout DVD or read a self-improvement book. Or for those of us in business, we can read a book or develop a webinar like this one. I've even had time to start a hobby I've been dreaming about. And part of that nightly routine is to do it 10 at 10. I started that way before this pandemic started. And it's called 10 at 10. I made it up myself one night when I was feeling unmotivated to figure out what I was going to do the next day. 10 at 10 is 10 things that you're going to do or 10 tasks you're going to do, and you do it at 10 p.m. So you find phone numbers for phone calls or bills you need to pay or things you need to look up, or like how to do a PowerPoint for a webinar, for example. I found that if I write things down, they're much more likely to get done. I bet you feel the same way. But I am curious if anyone else does this. Do you ever, now be honest, do you ever do a task that's not on your list and then you add it to your list and then cross it off? I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. When I give this presentation in person, I get many people nodding. Go ahead and type yes in the comments if you do this one too. Let me know that I'm not alone. Another tip I have for you is to organize your work area before leaving for the day. It gives you a feeling of completion. Plus, when you start work the next day, there's already a sense of calm and order to your work area. And I find that it's easier to find things and get started and be more productive, which is the whole point. Reduce the clutter on your desk and you're more productive. Does anybody have kids at home all the time with this, that they're doing their e-learning? and maybe a spouse is at home working from home. I know my husband's here working all the time, but we're thankful that he has a job, so not complaining at all. But it is a different dynamic. I'm used to being here a lot by myself if I don't have a workshop or a client. And the other thing is, if you live alone, there's other distractions like Netflix, TV, Amazon Prime, Facebook, doing nothing, staring at whatever you can find to do. But distractions, the reason I bring this up is distractions are a form of mental clutter as well. The best suggestion for this is to establish office hours. A few of my clients have office hours, and I find it really interesting at the beginning because I would call and I would get their voicemail, and it would say, "I'll call you back between 4 and 6." Something like that. And I think, at first when it started, I'm like, I just need to ask you a quick question. But then when I realized how effective it was and how they made all their calls at once, I was inspired to implement it in my life too. And so I share that with you as well. When you establish hours that you're going to work, or the kids are going to do e-learning, or your husband's going to work, make sure that that you talk to the kids about it and your spouse about it. And my clients have kids that know to only interrupt them if it's a true medical emergency or if the house is on fire. That's it. So if you get more done, you have more energy and sanity for dinner and family time in the evening. Here's a quick tip, and I'm not going to lie, I'm working on this one. This is a great tip, though. If it takes you less than 5 minutes, just do it. I find that if I put things off that I dread doing, I spend all day dreading them and wasting too much mental energy. Does anybody else do that, or is it just me? Then when I do the actual task, I think, oh my gosh, why did I dread that all day? It's so dumb. And I'm getting better about this, and the relief is helping me to implement it more into my life. No more dreading projects that I don't want to do or activities that I don't want to do when I follow my own advice. If you think of something else that needs to be done while working on something, jot it down, get it out of your brain, and get back to the task at hand. That makes sense, right? Clear your head and refocus. Otherwise, in the back of our brain, we just keep thinking about all the other things we have to do. Write it down, whether you're working on something else or you wake up in the middle of the night, just write it down and get it out of your head. One of the last things I want to talk about, a couple last things, is to figure out your energy cycle. And I know that sounds kind of foo-foo and rah-rah and all that, but it's really a fancy way just to say to figure out when you're most productive. You know, is it the first thing in the morning before your family's awake, as soon as the kids go to school, right after lunch, family gets home from school and work, or maybe it's after your family goes to bed? I get a lot done from 10 p.m. to midnight or so after my husband goes to bed. It's worth your time to figure out when that energy is highest and work on your most difficult tasks then. And speaking of your most difficult and dreaded tasks, do them when you have the most energy, or another tip is to do them first thing in the morning. Mark Twain, we're all familiar with Mark Twain, said that if you eat a live frog, first thing in the morning, it will probably be the worst thing you do all day. Which, you think about that, it probably would be, for most of us, the worst thing we do all day. And the reason he said that is because the rest of your day will go much easier, less dread of a certain task. There's an author that I follow that I really like, that if you suffer with procrastination, his name is Brian Tracy, and he wrote a book called Eat That Frog based on the Mark Twain quote. So it's basically chock full of easy procrastination tips, not easy procrastination tips, but it's an easy read and it's full of procrastination tips if you suffer from that. Check that out for sure. Eat That Frog is the name of the book by Brian Tracy. Another thing I like to do when I'm struggling to get something done, maybe this will help you too. It helped me when I figured it out. I made it a little more simple on myself, and I want to share it with you, is to pair the thing that you dread with a more appealing task. Like, I make phone calls for my business, which I dread making. So now when I do that, I reward myself with a 15-minute walk, or to play on Facebook for 5 minutes, whatever fits into your schedule that day. I found a lot more of my dreaded tasks get done sooner in the day, when I know I get to do something fun right afterwards. Now, you may be saying this is all good and fine, Cindy, and you give me a lot of time-saving tips, but I still have some tricky situations I need to figure out or work through. Next slide, Ryan. And I'm going to show you this slide, and it's an assessment and a worksheet I created to go along with this webinar. At the top, when it pops up, you'll see the guide. There we go. Thanks, Ryan. You'll see the guide to get started. To get started, you choose a question from the left-hand side, titled Questions to Ask Myself. And then you write whatever question that is that you relate to, and write it under the situation or symptom box below. Once you write that down, you choose a possible solution from the right-hand box under Possible Solutions. Which one sounds the best to you? It might be 2 or 3 different solutions are best, or you don't know which one, or you have to think about it. But pick one or 1 or 2 that will help you with your symptom. And then you write that down under What I Can Do. From there, you will come up with a specific action to take. And now, which may be obvious and it may not be so obvious. A couple of them are, doing some research or asking somebody else for help. So if you need to do that, that would be your next action. But then you want to figure out when you're going to take that action. That's the tough part. I want you to be as specific as you can. I take it a step further on my worksheet and ask you to add it to your calendar, because I really believe that if it's written down, it's more likely to get done. It was easy for me to say, oh, I'm going to talk to my friend later about dinner, and then 3 more dinners would happen, and I'd be like, oh gosh, why don't I just talk to her? But if I had written down a date, I would see it in black and white. And of course, the last column is, did you do it? Did you complete it? If your situation has many action steps to complete, you might want to use a separate worksheet for each one. This sheet that I created is for you to personalize and customize and really help you think through what's bogging you down and not letting you be as productive as you want to be. Now, the home organizer in me has one last tip about this worksheet, well, maybe 2. If you can, print it out on a colored sheet of paper so it's easier to find if it gets misplaced. And once you print it and work on it, put it in a safe place too. That's one thing that less to clutter up your mind and helps you to be more productive when you don't spend a lot of time looking for it. Next slide, Ryan. Now we're going to open it up for questions and answers. Who has a question? Ryan's going to go ahead and read the question, and I'll answer to the best of my ability.
For those of you watching with us in the comments of the video, go ahead and enter your question. We don't have any from our viewers yet, Cindy, but we encourage our viewers watching to ask their questions at this time.
Okay, that sounds good. I must have been super thorough. They don't have any questions. That or they're overwhelmed and they've got a lot of questions.
Well, Cindy, I'm going to ask you a question here since it's relevant to the scenario. Carly and myself here with Open in Indiana, any organizing tips that you have for couples in the same business that work from home?
Yeah, I would probably establish some business hours where you know what time you're both working. A lot of people will try and work. I've worked with a lot of clients that have desks in the same physical space, like their backs are to each other. So if you can, try and have separate spaces, and then also establish working hours like I was talking about earlier. So maybe you work for, you might work at the same time, but that's kind of golden time where you don't bother each other. Or maybe if you're working on something that takes longer, you have the same established hours, but then you say, okay, I know we're going to work from 8 to 4 and take some breaks and whatever, but I really need to get this webinar or something done for Open in Indiana. So why don't we, I'm going to need from 6 to 9, and then just go into your office and shut the door and talk about it so that she can respect that and you can get your work done so that at 9 you can do whatever you want to do together.
Great.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Our next question is from Myra Levine. And her question is, how do you deal with the fear of failing at the tasks we need to do?
Well, as I was talking about earlier, the best way is, and it took me a long time to realize this and to implement it, is progress is more important than perfection. What do they say? Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. So you basically have to not be afraid to fail, and just try. And I can't remember who it was, but somebody said, well, I tried to do something 1,000 times. Maybe it was with the light bulb, and I found 1,000 ways that didn't work. He didn't talk about how he found one way that worked. He found 1,000 ways that didn't work. So just keep chugging along and refocus and see what you can do to change your outlook, or make a list of things that might be different, or search the internet and maybe or ask a friend and see if they have a different idea for you. Because a lot of times when you're in the trenches trying to figure something out, I know I'll ask my husband or a friend and they say, well, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, I never even thought of that. And it's so obvious to them because they're not thinking about it or overthinking it all the time.
Great. Our next question is from Christian Tombers. And his question is, what is your best advice for a bachelor perfectionist procrastinator?
That's quite a combination. It depends on, well, procrastination, actually, I would get that Eat That Frog book. If you want to borrow it from me, that's fine, but it's got a lot of highlighting in it. I would first suggest to get that book because he gives a lot of easy to read practical tips. As far as perfectionists, I think, Christian, as well as I learned it the same, and it was beat into my head by AJ Klingerman in our marketing group that says good is good enough. What's better, the newsletter that has a couple of typos and goes out to all your customers, or the one that is sitting in your computer waiting to be sent? So, I think the easiest answer for that is to just say, just press enter. Just press enter. You can always tweak it later. I struggle with that as well, but sometimes you just have to say, good is good enough, and you can always tweak it later. And you find that later, once you send something or do something, it was good enough. It was good enough.
Okay, great. Cindy, I believe that's the end of our questions here that we have from our viewers.
Okay, I'm going to conclude then. I want to thank everybody for all the questions in the chat. That was great. It gave me a little bit to work on to think about how to perfect my speech or make it a little bit better, the presentation. Next slide, Ryan. And this is the last slide. I want you to feel free to take a picture of my contact info. And I hope you enjoyed learning about what mental clutter is and how it's related to physical and financial clutter, and how it can affect you and really affect you in your productivity. Remember, I said at the beginning that all clutter is related? Well, I want to share a quick success story with you. When my friend and I stopped going out for expensive and unhealthy dinners after we had that talk, slowly our bank account started to increase and we had less financial clutter. I didn't dread going to dinner with her and think about how I was going to be so stressed out and behind on all my tasks and not get to spend time with my husband. So I had less mental clutter. And amazingly enough, my clothes started to fit a little better. So I was able to let go of some of the excess clothes in my closet. Less stress, less decisions. And I made healthier choices when eating out. I made healthier food and I started to feel better and I had more energy, mental and physical energy. And this led me all back to the beginning of this whole webinar of being more productive. When I felt better, I could do more and wanted to do more. So reducing one type of clutter really helped me to reduce the other types of clutter in my life. It really did. And I know it's a cliche, but if I can do it, I know you can too. I honestly believe that. I want you to take away from this webinar the tips that I shared, the worksheet that I shared, and let go or reduce your mental clutter so you can be more productive. Not only be more productive, but be more productive and live a life you love and deserve. Thank you, Ryan, again for having me on.
Cindy, thank you so much for being our presenter today, and thank you so much for everyone watching live. This webinar will be available in the coming days on our website at www.openindiana.com/watch. If you'd like to contact Cindy Garloch to learn more, you can visit her website, www.thecureforyourclutter.com, or reach her by phone at 317-442-2450. Thanks for watching, everybody.